Hi everybody, Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today I've got Nick Coniglio and Marnie Stockman. And we're going to be talking about their book, Lead It Like Lasso. Now, why on earth did you write a book about a TV program?
So, if you've seen the TV program, there's a world of folks who found Ted Lasso to be really inspiring and to make them want to be better versions of themselves. But we had a lot of parallels in our own life about the show Ted Lasso, including we started, scaled, and sold a company in the same 3 years that Ted Lasso aired, using a lot of the same tactics or the same culture. Nick, what do you have to say about that?
Well, first, thanks for having us on, Tim. It's a pleasure to be here. I will say this. So I had watched the show first, Ted Lasso, and as I was watching the show, something ringed familiar, right? I was watching this character who was a bit goofy, who was positive, who showed vulnerability, and I'm thinking like, I have been working with Ted Lasso for the past however many years, and that was Marnie Stockman, because that's exactly her leadership style. And when we were thinking about telling our story about building our business, scaling it, and selling it, um, we really wanted to kind of bring something to the table that was a little bit different, right? We've read leadership books, and they were all um, most of them are academic based, research based, which is kind of a tough read sometimes. Or the other aspect of it is they're written by people who like the Richard Bransons of the world or the Oprah Winfrey's, where it just doesn't seem relatable. And we really thought that we wanted to deliver a message that seemed relatable, and using a show like Ted Lasso seemed like a really different way to do that. And we weren't really sure what the response would be, but it's really been fantastic, especially around that whole notion of being relatable.
So to cut to the chase, the real thing about the book, isn't it, is the fact that it's a workbook for ourselves.
Correct.
It, it's
Exactly.
it's about leadership comes from ourselves, and what you do in the last part. So I'm telling people, I'm kind of giving people the answer in the back of the maths
Yeah.
book.
Yeah.
Is there's a whole bunch of templates to actually work out what we can do ourselves as to be better leaders.
Exactly. Exactly. And as a former high school math teacher, I appreciate that we're talking about the answers in the back of the math book.
I think our we start the book off. You started with the end. We'll start with the beginning. We start the book off with rules, right? Rules that kind of act as guide rails to how you approach becoming the best version of yourself. And our number one rule, just to what you were saying earlier, Tim, is that leadership is life, and the fact that everybody's a leader. It's leadership isn't about titles only. Leadership happens, yes, in a boardroom, but it also happens in a locker room. It happens in a classroom. It happens in a living room. And for those people who really want to truly become the best versions of themselves, they need to look within, exactly like you were saying. And our book, I think, is just one of many frameworks, right, that we have found very successful in our own lives and our own experiences in terms of how to approach doing exactly that.
In terms of it's interesting the way that you structure it, because you do actually work through. Was it how many of these rules have you got?
We have 11.
11.
11. I knew it wasn't like 10 or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you work through, and one of the things that's really really nice about it is that, as you say, with a lot of books, they're very academic.
Yeah.
So there's lots of words.
Yeah.
But one of the things that you've done, and I'm just going to hold it up to you've actually got these diagrams in here to actually break up the text. And you work through all these different leadership rules. Is there anyone in particular that you particularly like?
So we're fans of them all, but I will say that almost on the daily, we will say to defeat the blank page. Now, it seems like a simple one, it is because so often folks get stuck. And to just do something and start now to get momentum building, I think is really critical for anything. If you want to get better in any one area at all, you have to start and you have to do something. So defeat the blank page, get something done.
Yeah.
Nick, what's yours?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one that we use, like Marnie said, on the daily. I think we have a rule in there about manifesting it, right? Truly, and this very much aligns with the show of Ted Lasso, but this is truly how we have built businesses in our experiences, and how we approach everything is we dream. And I think you also have to put a plan in place, and that's what we walk through in the book. But the importance of believing that you could actually do something, even when you're dealing with those times when you are stuck and you're struggling, has really been beneficial to everything, every project, every initiative that we've taken on.
You also was it start off in page 33 actually doing a leadership assessment. Yeah. And actually discovering well, it's a multiple choice
yeah.
And that's where you start the discussion about the journey that you take the reader on in terms of understanding who they are. I'm going to go to the back of the book again, as and say the number one thing that when people come on here and talk about leadership, the number one thing they say is you need to be self-aware.
Yep.
Yes.
And you talk about that in your book. And that's part of this self-awareness journey, isn't it? Is that you start taking people through.
So it's interesting because that is so often, if folks shout us out on social media, they'll respond to our Facebook ads and say, I'm a Roy Kent, I'm a Rebecca Welton. They'll tell us the character, and what they seem to really, what resonates with them is, after they find out what character they are, we say, here are some common traits for this type of character, and here are some things you might need to consider working on. And we've done live presentations, we've done workshops, and the folks really respond to that and say, like, yeah, that's me. I get now why I behave in a certain way, or, that makes sense. And, we talk about, as you said at the beginning, this is about a personal journey, and that leadership happens everywhere. So it's really interesting when folks realize that because they're a Roy Kent, they see how behaviors play out at their home and at their work. So it's not just the way you do work, it's kind of the way you do everything. And
I think the other important point of that is common sense, but I don't think a lot of people, some people at least, don't really think of it this way. But there's more than one way to lead, right? Some people think, okay, to lead you have to follow this specific template. And I think one of the examples that we talk about quite often is, look at these five different characters. They're very, very different. They all have their own strengths. They all have, different areas and different growth opportunities. And it's important. Like myself personally, I'm very different than Marnie, right? Marnie's very much outgoing. I often talk about the fact that I think, she was born a natural leader, where I myself, not so much. I'm an introvert. I don't typically like to engage with people, or didn't when I was younger, but that's okay. That's okay. I have my own strengths, just like Roy has different strengths from Ted, who has different strengths from Keely. It doesn't mean that you can't lead. And that is so important for people, especially emerging leaders, to figure out exactly who they are, what their core values are, and what drives them. And that's how they will ultimately be able to lead themselves. And you cannot lead others without leading yourself first.
And I think, I agree with you. I think you're right in terms of saying that everybody has a different leadership style, but it's also understanding your strengths and weaknesses. Yep. And being able to make sure that you're not being blindsided by them.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Blind spots. Yeah, we often talk about the blind spot effect, right? And you really can't. It's hard to really even recognize those blind spots if you're not self-aware. Just like you said earlier, Tim, if you're not self-aware in terms of truly what your strengths are and where those areas are that you can and need to grow in.
It also gives you the opportunity to, Ted did a masterful job of forming his support network or challenge network, which he called the Diamond Dogs, right? And we talk in there about the importance of having folks that complement your strengths and weaknesses, and you complement theirs, because that's the way every person operating at their best level, rising tide lifts all ships. And Ted knew that. It's how he coached the team. And we know, right? Nick is very much my diamond dog. He pushes me, he challenges me to be better and fills in those blind spots, because boy, I have them.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
We all have them, right? Some of us are just more self-aware, like we said, or have young adult children who keep a list of Post-it notes of what we've done wrong.
So Ted often leads with kindness, but kindness can often be mistaken for weakness, can't it?
Oh, it can. We talk about that, especially so Ted and Sam. So Sam Obasanya is another character in the book that we talk about. And we say that don't take my kindness for weakness. One thing that Ted was good at was still having the hard conversation, even though, he was still kind about it. But that is a challenge many times for kind leaders, is when there is a conflict to actually address it. So many kind folks are people pleasers, and goodness knows Nick and I'll each say we are people pleasers, but we've had to learn to address and have courageous conversations, right? And confront the awkward in order to get to a better place.
Yeah. We as leaders, we all end up having to have difficult conversations with people in part of life. So you talk in chapter 5 about vision and purpose. It's something that it's talked about a lot, especially on social media, about us having a purpose in life and a vision. What can you share with us about that?
Well, I think a couple of things. I think the first thing that is a little bit different about our book is a lot of leadership frameworks start with vision and purpose. And I think we take a little bit of a different approach in that we start with core values and culture, because it's critical to understanding how to get to your vision and purpose. We often talk about finding out about your why, right? And that is ultimately what's going to be, we talked about the rules earlier as being a little bit of a guide rail in terms of how you approach anything in life. But defining your vision and your purpose and what your why is really is critical in defining those. If you think of it like a bowling alley, right? Those gutters, those guide rails that kind of keep you.
That's where I always seem to put the ball.
Yeah. And it's great when you have those little
bumper pads
come out, the bumper pads, right? That keep the ball in the lane. And I think we talk about the importance of having, truly understanding what your why is. And we give you some exercises to help you define those, but to keep those bumper pads up to make sure that the decisions that you're making stay in the lane and are approaching the pins as they should be.
And so often folks are really good about coming up with new ideas of things to do, but they're not really good at taking things off their plate. And sometimes the what to say no to is just as important. So as Nick said, if you use your vision and purpose to help you say no, you are much more likely to do the right actions instead of just all the actions.
Yeah, I think it's easy just to keep saying yes to it stuff, isn't it? And actually your vision and purpose gives you the boundaries. Exactly. Sarah Browning says Sarah's been on the show before, and I think she was we were talking about kindness and weakness, and she says, I was having this conversation with a group this morning about this exact point. You can have difficult conversations with kindness.
Yeah. Brene Brown, who wrote Dare to Lead, talks about how clear is kind, that it is lying to folks to not have the honest conversation, right? To just skirt an issue because it's uncomfortable. So it is actually the kind thing to do is to be clear and direct and honest. And again, you certainly don't need to be rude about it. We often see the mistake of folks who will use, like, in the sake of transparency, I'm going to be rude. The people that don't mind the awkward conversation. And that is not helpful, right? What is helpful is to be kind and be clear about the issue and come to a resolution, be solution oriented, not just, arguing about the fact that it happened. Like, stop admiring the problem. Let's come up with a solution type of thing.
Yeah. You also talk about communication and influence, don't you, in the book? And you go into detail about emotional intelligence. And I need to basically say to people that if you're offended by certain language, don't buy the book.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Just the first page.
There is certain. I've just spotted a word on 102. And I should say there is profanity in the book.
There is, yeah.
There is. And there was profanity in the show, which is ironic because I have never to this day heard Marnie Stockman cuss, say a bad word. But it's there's not a lot in our forward. We have an imaginary forward from Roy Kent.
You do,
if you
yes.
watch the show, that that he uses the F word constantly. We'll have to check 102. I didn't realize there was one.
Yeah, it is what they call Coach. When
yes.
Yeah. Because I'm not going to say it also.
Yeah. But communication, just back to your point, is, we were actually just on a podcast this morning and we took a deep dive into, just how critically important communication is. And it's, without good communication, truly, it's almost impossible to have an effective team. And we have a lot of tools in the book. We have, a communication guide, right? Marnie has a story of not only how important it is to communicate, but really setting expectations around communication. What forms of communication do you like versus Tim versus Marnie? It may be very different. People react differently based on who they are as an individual. And it's so important to understand not just the fact that you should communicate open, honestly, with empathy, but how exactly to bring your point across depending on the audience that you speak with.
Yeah, I mean, you go through and about the importance of having a network and the importance of having legacy. And then you go in and you actually go through the templates about creating your core values, your personal operating system, your communication guide, your vision, your diamond dogs, as you mentioned earlier on, your network and your legacy. And it's if it's not just a book, it's a workbook, isn't it, for people to work through and have a sit down and think about what they want.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, folks will ask us if we have an audiobook, and we don't, because every time we've gone down the path of should we have an audiobook, we say, but we need you to write in this book and fill out the worksheets. And one of my favorite reviews on Amazon is from a woman named Katrina, who said, I sat down with a tea, and a blanket and my fireplace and the book. And then she said, I realized I was doing it all wrong. What I needed was a pencil in my hand so I could really go through and think about myself. So she said she read through it once and then she went back and did all of the workbook pages. So yeah, to your point, it is a workbook to really look and do that work of self-awareness so you can, lead yourself and then, can work toward leading others if that's the path you want to take.
And you also give examples, don't you? Because you work through and say, these are, I'm trying to remember the names of the leaders that you talk about, but you work through and you do a similar thing for them, don't you?
Yeah. So let's just take Rebecca Welton, for example, who is one of the characters in Ted Lasso. So in the real world, Walt Disney would have been a Rebecca Welton. And so we talk about how that looks, for actual humans that are real leaders, because yes, Ted Lasso was a television show. So it's easy for everything to turn out okay when you have writers guaranteeing that. So we did talk through real world leaders that sort of have the same personality traits, because to Nick's point earlier, you don't have to be one type, right? Any of these types can be great leaders if they work on themselves.
Nick?
No,
introverted view?
I'm sorry, say that
An
again.
introverted view?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think everything that Marnie said. I think one of the important things, it doesn't matter what type of leader you are. I think speaking to the exercises, the workbooks, all the things that we have in the book, I think one of the points we really want to bring across with our book is that there's really no magic potion to get you from here to there to become the best version of yourself. You have to put in the work, and that is true in almost any initiative that you take on. And I think, for myself, somebody who is not naturally inclined to lead, I have to, last 30 years I've been in business, I have to put in the work and doing activities like we have in the book, truly identifying what drives me, how I communicate with people, thinking about my legacy and where I want to be, setting SMART goals. Those are all things that have helped me get from, a computer programmer that sat in an office closet when I first started working to becoming, I've been in executive leadership positions for the past 20 years. So doing the work is something that we wanted to come across in this book. And I think based on your questions, it likely did, based on you talking about the different activities that we have.
Any final comments, Marnie?
Oh, just thank you for having us. And I hope everyone does the self-awareness work.
Okay. And so this is your book, Lead It Like Lasso, a leadership book for life, your life. And I guess you can buy this on Amazon and
Sure can.
all good
Barnes and Noble.
bookshops.
Yeah, absolutely.
And where can we find you, Nick and Marnie?
So Lead It Like Lasso on all the socials or by our names on LinkedIn.
Yep.
Okay. And thank you so much. Great book. Really loved it. But you do need to sit down with a pencil and do